The Australian Defence Force has a rich legacy of unique camouflage patterns. Some of these are globally recognised for their effectiveness and iconic style, while others are not so universally praised.
This is disgusting.
This video will highlight the complete history of Australian camouflage uniforms and rank them in tier list fashion from worst to best. Before starting, let's clarify some ground rules. Number 1. The patterns must be a domestic Australian creation or production. This disqualifies uniforms that, while issued, were developed abroad, such as Crye Precision Multicam, DCU, or Target Stripe. Number 2. The patterns must have been issued for either training or operations in a formal capacity. So Aussie Kmart Urban Camo that Jono wore while playing Op4 one time doesn't count. Number 3. The patterns will be ranked on the basis of effectiveness and aesthetics. Put simply, how well does it conceal the user in a given environment? And secondly, how cool does it look? We begin with the worst of the worst. Camouflage patterns that are neither pleasing to the eye nor adept at hiding their users in the tactical sense. And there is no better entry to kick off the list than with GPU. GPU, or General Purpose Uniform, was the Royal Australian Air Force's way of creating a brand-specific uniform. While sharing the same patterns as the Army's AMCU, the gaudy colourway consists of shades of blue, grey and white. This nauseating pattern was developed to visually differentiate the Air Force from Army personnel, specifically during humanitarian operations or domestic assistance missions. While it manages to achieve this, it does so at great cost to the credibility of Air Force personnel, who now appear more like Z-list extras from the Street Fighter movie. E tier. Our next admission, DPMU, was a well-intentioned but poorly executed attempt to create a multi-domain pattern. Disruptive Pattern Midpoint Uniform, or Midpoint for short, was developed in 2010 to conceal diggers in both the deserts and green zones of Afghanistan. It was quickly discovered during trials that it excelled in neither environment and was even found to be less effective than legacy DPCU. Midpoint was met with fierce resistance from trial participants in both Australia and Afghanistan, and after becoming a media scandal was soon replaced by Crye Precision Multicam, for being both ineffective as a camouflage and also exceptionally ugly D tier. Rising up the list, we begin to encounter patterns that are somewhat effective but deficient in drip, or drippy patterns called lacking in effectiveness. One such example is DPDU, or Disruptive Pattern Desert Uniform. The first versions of this were developed in 1998 and saw use with the SASR in Afghanistan 2001. It was refined over 3 versions and was issued to troops in both Iraq and Afghanistan until 2010. Although a historically iconic part of Australia's Middle East campaign, the micro shapes of the donor DPCU pattern proved less adept when applied to the desert environment, and its overabundance leaves it less desirable than its rival family members. C tier. In 2008, the Navy too decided they wanted a unique corporate identity and created the Disruptive Pattern Naval Uniform, or DPNU. Sharing the shapes of DPCU, this pattern was recoloured into 3 shades of grey with olive green accents on a light grey background. Like the ghastly GPU, its primary function was to give Navy personnel a sense of identity. Unlike GPU, however, it managed to look somewhat cool, having its reputation boosted by the hit TV show Sea Patrol. If you manage to find a set of DPNU pants, chop off the legs, and you've got yourself a dope set of cargo shorts that will be the envy of everyone around you at Patong Beach. C tier. PLATACAM is one of the outliers on the list, being the only digital style pattern. Developed by Australian manufacturer PLATACAM, it was briefly used by the Special Operations Task Group in Afghanistan circa 2008, consisting of the Auscam colour palette in a pixelated pattern akin to MARPAT or UCP. It was issued in a trial capacity before being eventually replaced by Multicam. It's a reasonably drippy pattern that leveraged the emergence of pixel camouflage at the time, but arguably wasn't more effective than standard DPCU. C tier. Red Auscam, or simply Enemy Cam, is the instantly recognisable red-coloured DPCU uniform. Issued to the personnel role-playing as enemy combatants, the uniform was ubiquitous across training exercises in the 90s, but has since become a scarce and highly sought-after bit of kit. While it logically offers minimal concealment in the natural environment, Red Auscam scores mega points on the aesthetic scale, which outweighs its lack of camouflage utility. B tier. After watching the Army shed their jellybean costume and jump aboard the Multicam train, the Navy followed suit with MMPU, short for Maritime Multicam Pattern Uniform. MMPU shares the same pattern as AMCU, complete with a sunglasses snail. Like DPNU, it blends shades of grey, blue and green over a light grey base, and is intended to retain the uniform's unique identity. Unlike DPNU, however, MMPU plausibly looks like it would make an effective camouflage pattern, and you could argue that it would be a viable littoral or urban combat uniform, as well as looking fresh. B tier. Moving up, we start meeting legends of the game, true icons of the camouflage world renowned for both their efficacy and flair, and there is perhaps no Australian pattern with more charm than DPCU. Disruptive Pattern Camouflage Uniform, or Auscam, is a superstar in the global camouflage game. Endearingly named the Jellybean Suit, or Hearts and Bunnies camo, it served the Australian Army faithfully from the late 80s until its replacement in 2014. Auscam was supremely effective in the bush of Australia, the jungles of the Pacific, and the green zones of Afghanistan. The Keanu Reeves of the DPCU family of patterns, Auscam is modest, competent, and adored by most. A tier. Nice. In a world slowly being consumed by the leviathan that is Cry Precision, AMCU stands out as a multicam derivative that retains a high degree of individuality while still looking sharp. Developed in 2013 as the replacement for all domestic and operational uniforms, Australian Multicam Camouflage Uniform uses a pattern derived from Multicam, with 7 Australian terrain optimised colours as opposed to the 5 found in DPCU. While it looks sick and is highly effective in the Australian landscape, it does not excel as a multi-domain pattern. A tier. Last on our list, and taking its rightful place as the sole S-tier placeholder, is AMP. Australian Multicam pattern was developed in 2011 as a replacement to the Cry G3 Multicam uniforms that were then issued for Afghanistan deployments. A collaboration between the Defence Materiel Organisation and Cry Precision, the Army spent megabucks on licensing this Australian-specific version of Multicam. The resulting AMP combines elements from the original Multicam design with features of DPCU, such as the distinctive bunny and jellybean shapes, though reduced in scale. AMP was issued to Special Operations Command and conventional forces in Afghanistan, before being replaced by AMCU in 2014. While short-lived, AMP was a supremely capable multi-terrain pattern that managed to retain a sense of Australian soldier identity and at the same time, still managed to look extremely sick. Thank you for the gift of your time.